С возвращением! Сегодня у нас в гостях Сейед Маранди, профессор Тегеранского университета и бывший советник иранской делегации на переговорах по ядерной программе. Рад снова вас видеть, и я рад слышать, что в Тегеране сегодня спокойнее. Спасибо большое за приглашение, Глен. Всегда приятно участвовать в вашей передаче. Да, я дома, и у нас действительно спокойнее, но сегодня израильский режим убивает ливанцев, проводит ковровые бомбардировки. Обстреливает разные города, нарушая соглашение о прекращении огня. Хотя Трамп говорит, что это не является нарушением соглашения. Премьер-министр Пакистана очень четко заявил об этом и написал в Твиттере, что Ливан является частью соглашения о прекращении огня. А поскольку режим продолжает убивать мирных жителей, нанося удары по ним, иранцы выпустили ракеты и снова перекрыли Ормузский пролив. Так что непонятно, как будут развиваться события, будут ли израильские войска продолжать наносить авиаудары по нашей территории. Думаю, что это скорее всего продолжится, и посмотрим, что предпримут американцы. Да, я должен был сказать, что мы записываем это сегодня, 8 апреля. Перед началом записи вы сказали, что пока мы разговариваем, иранские ракеты летят в сторону Израиля в ответ на нарушение Израилем соглашения о прекращении огня. Но думаю, начать стоит с вопроса о том, каковы же реальные условия соглашения. Я считаю, что это очень важное соглашение о прекращении огня, и оно кажется мне довольно необычным. Я имею в виду, что весь мир следит за этой войной против Ирана. Об этом пишут и в Wall Street Journal, и в Reuters. То есть, каковы реальные условия и почему так сложно получить на этот вопрос четкий ответ? Ну, сначала Соединенные Штаты заявили, что Иран должен сдаться. Они требовали безоговорочной капитуляции, по крайней мере Трамп, как и в предыдущей Ирано-Иракской войне. Затем это требование постепенно трансформировалось в план из 15 пунктов, который Иран отверг. Тогда Иран начал разрабатывать собственный план, который Высший совет национальной безопасности представил лидеру страны аятолле Саиду Муштаха Аль-Хамани. И он внес некоторые изменения. Они доработали план и отправили его в Пакистан. В итоге Трамп согласился, что этот план может стать основой для переговоров. Но это не значит, что мы добьемся мира. Это не значит, что Соединенные Штаты согласятся на эти 10 пунктов, хотя они вполне разумны. Но Соединенные Штаты – это империя, причем крайне высокомерная, и очень сложно представить, что они капитулируют и признают права других наций. Поэтому я считаю, что мы либо снова окажемся на пороге войны, либо США будет сложно пойти на это по ряду причин. Во-первых, в самих США на них оказывается сильное давление. Именно поэтому Трамп изначально согласился на это. Иранский план. Кроме того, на Соединенные Штаты оказывается сильное международное давление. И не забывайте, что Ормузский пролив сейчас, пока мы с вами разговариваем, закрыт. Кроме того, я участвовал в войне много лет назад, так что не могу сказать, что я эксперт в военных вопросах. Я был добровольцем и думал, что на дворе 1980-е, но с тех пор много воды утекло. Но очевидно, что американское вооружение сыграло свою роль. Мы должны оставаться в регионе. В Персидском заливе очень влажно и жарко, а на Аравийском полуострове бывают песчаные бури. И если я правильно помню, во время прошлых войн с Ираком американские военные понесли большие потери. И им пришлось потратить буквально сотни миллиардов долларов на ремонт грузовиков, самолетов и прочего. А в этот раз они даже не защищены должным образом, потому что их базы были разрушены, и их спешно перебросили в регион, где, как предполагалось, война будет очень короткой, и они легко одержат победу над Ираном. Так что я думаю, Соединенным Штатам будет очень сложно удерживать свои силы в регионе, и с каждым днем это будет становиться все труднее. Но иранцы все равно готовятся к худшему. Они не пойдут на это, потому что мы уже дважды вели переговоры с американцами и видели, чем закончились обе попытки. Во время переговоров они развязали 12-дневную войну, провели блицкриг. А в прошлом месяце, когда мы снова вели переговоры и достигли прогресса, они начали еще одну войну. Так что иранцы не станут доверять предстоящим переговорам. И как я уже сказал, пока мы с вами разговариваем, израильтяне делают все возможное, чтобы помешать установлению мира. Они жестоко атакуют Ливан, убивают женщин и детей. Только за последние несколько часов погибли сотни человек. Это просто немыслимая бойня. Это делается для того, чтобы помешать перемирию вступить в силу. А Трамп, изменив свою позицию и заявив, что Ливан не является частью конфликта, демонстрирует как свою слабость, так и то, что нам следует быть готовыми к возобновлению войны, несмотря на все трудности, с которыми это будет сопряжено для Соединенных Штатов. Да, Джо Кент тоже это говорил. Он опубликовал в Твиттере запись, в которой утверждал, что если США хотят, чтобы это мирное соглашение работало, они должны найти способ сдерживать Израиль. По его мнению, Израиль сделает все возможное, чтобы сорвать этот мирный процесс. Не допустит его. И опять же, это не совсем конспирология, потому что если вы следите за израильскими СМИ, то они сейчас в ужасном состоянии. Я видел видео с такими людьми, как Марк Левин. Он, конечно, не в Израиле, но он чуть ли не в ярости от происходящего в Израиле. Вы знаете, как они разочарованы тем, что перемирие было достигнуто. Так что я уверен, они получают огромное удовольствие от бомбардировок ливанских городов и убийств женщин и детей, потому что такова их истинная сущность. И именно это делает Нетаньяху. Он пытается сорвать перемирие, а еще он хочет убивать людей, чтобы израильтяне, знаете, дали ему больше свободы действий, потому что это геноцид. Общество, как мы видим по опросам, поддерживает его. Да, я тоже сегодня смотрел видео из Ливана. Судя по всему, там весь день без остановки бомбят. Кроме того, видео сняты в жилых районах, так что на них видно, как убивают мужчин, женщин и детей. Для всех тех, кто, знаете, говорит, что они рады прекращению огня, очень странно, что они не высказываются против этого, потому что это, как и следовало ожидать. Это нарушает режим прекращения огня. Это нарушение режима прекращения огня. Глен, прости, что перебиваю тебя во второй раз, но с чего бы им что-то говорить? Трамп уже несколько недель твердит, что сотрет Иран с лица земли. Недавно он заявил, что вернет Иран в каменный век. А меньше 2 суток назад, 48 часов назад, он сказал, что сотрет иранскую цивилизацию с лица земли. Вы видели, чтобы хоть один крупный западный журналист возмутился этой угрозой? Угрозой совершить величайший в истории человечества Холокост. Вы видели, чтобы хоть кто-то из западных журналистов, даже противников Трампа, высказался? Вы видели, чтобы Washington Post, The Guardian или кто-то из этих прогрессистов, либералов или консерваторов, кто угодно из мейнстрима высказался? Высказывал ли кто-нибудь из них возмущение, говоря, что вы хотите совершить? Вы видели, чтобы New York Times опубликовала большую статью, в которой Трампа клеймят как военного преступника? Нет, потому что для империи мы все ничтожество. Мы все амаликитяне, как и сионисты. Мы все амаликитяне. Мы для них недочеловеки. Мы недочеловеки для тех журналистов, у которых по 2-3 миллиона подписчиков, сотни тысяч подписчиков, но которые ничего не сказали. Так с чего бы им возмущаться убийством ливанских женщин и детей? На самом деле они попытаются оправдать это убийство. В западных репортажах говорится, что это опорные пункты или базы Хезболлы, хотя всем известно, что израильский режим придерживается доктрины Дахия. Другими словами, он хочет сравнять город с землей, как будто косит газон в Газе. Дахия – это южный район Бейрута. То есть, понимаете, они хотят его уничтожить. А косить газон – это про Газу, про то, чтобы сравнять ее с землей. Это открытая политика. Но ни в одном из западных изданий об этом не пишут, потому что у них нет моральных ориентиров. Когда я говорю, что Западом управляет клика Эпштейна, я имею в виду именно это. СМИ принадлежат клике Эпштейна. Журналисты – это просто работники СМИ на службе у олигархов. А правительство принадлежат клике Эпштейна. Иначе какой здравомыслящий человек будет смотреть на эту бойню и не возмущаться? Думаю, это справедливое замечание. Я видел репортаж BBC, в котором они якобы взяли интервью у иранца в Тегеране, и он сказал, что, знаете, если бы США уничтожили все электростанции и мосты, а также сбросили бы ядерную бомбу на Тегеран и стерли бы все с лица земли, то, наверное, это было бы лучше, чем жить при таком правительстве, простите, режиме. И это, в общем-то, да, понимаете, это, я думаю, важно, потому что это не просто так. Такое геноцидальное мышление присуще не только Трампу. Это нечто, что можно наблюдать повсюду, и это пугает. А еще это очень саморазрушительно для Запада, можно сказать, потому что весь политический Запад основывает свою легитимность на гуманистических, либеральных и демократических принципах. Гуманитарно-либерально-демократических принципах. Так что, когда вы, с другой стороны, обеспечиваете легитимность Холокоста против, скажем так, иранской цивилизации, то да, вы тоже создаете кризис легитимности. Но я хотел спросить, что перемирие должно быть заключено в течение следующих 2 недель. Но в эти 2 недели, как вы понимаете, переговоры должны привести к чему-то более конкретному, знаете, к чему-то такому, что Трамп не сможет просто так взять и написать в Твиттере через 20 минут после того, как он, знаете, по сути, выведет Ливан из соглашения. Или да, неужели 2 недель достаточно? Как вы думаете, удастся ли чего-то добиться по итогам этих 2 недель? Думаю, если все пойдет хорошо, то срок в 2 недели продлят, и, возможно, удастся договориться по каким-то второстепенным вопросам или по тем, которые решить проще. Но я не верю, что мы сможем прийти к соглашению с США по тем 10 пунктам, которые Иран включил в свой план. Потому что США так не работают. Это империя, и это высокомерная империя, а Трамп – самый высокомерный из всех высокомерных императоров. Кроме того, Трамп крайне непоследователен. Сегодня он говорит одно, а завтра другое. Утром он говорит одно, а после обеда другое. Он может сказать что-то одно, а потом сказать противоположное. Так что я не завидую тем, кому предстоит вести переговоры с США напрямую или через посредников, передавая сообщения туда и обратно. Но я думаю, что сейчас главный вопрос заключается в том, не возобновятся ли в ближайшие недели боевые действия между Ираном и Соединенными Штатами. Я уверен, что иранцы уже сейчас готовятся к дальнейшему кровопролитию и новым атакам. Но, как я уже говорил, Трампу будет сложно развязать эту войну, потому что она и так крайне непопулярна и ни к чему не привела. И нет никаких признаков того, что Иран стал слабее. На протяжении 40 дней иранцы днем и ночью обстреливают ракетами и беспилотниками израильский режим, США, американские объекты в Персидском заливе и их союзников, которые участвуют в войне. В ближайшие месяцы Иран будет способен продолжать в том же духе. По имеющимся данным, у Ирана гораздо больше ракет и беспилотников, чем можно себе представить. Мы уже обсуждали это. Иран готовился к этой войне 25 лет. Иран уверен в своих силах и в том, что его не постигнет неудача. В ходе той операции по похищению иранского урана. Я думаю, это тоже оказывает давление на Трампа. Так что по целому ряду причин ему будет сложно развязать войну, но я думаю, что Иран не станет рисковать. Он будет готовиться. А может ли война принять другую форму, если США захотят выйти из нее и фактически передать ее странам Персидского залива или Израилю? Может ли она перерасти в ирано-израильский конфликт? То есть, по их словам, Ливан не подпадает под действие соглашения о прекращении огня. Иран говорит, что тогда и Израиль не подпадает под действие соглашения о прекращении огня. И это просто принимает другую форму. Потому что я видел репортаж как раз перед тем, как мы вышли в эфир, о том, что истребитель «Мираж» ВВС Объединенных Арабских Эмиратов, по всей видимости, атаковал иранский объект, нефтехимический комплекс на острове Лаван. И да, я видел заявление властей ОАЭ о том, что они хотят получить компенсацию от Ирана. Я не понимаю, зачем им продолжать эту войну. Они ведь очень уязвимы, особенно если США больше не хотят играть ведущую роль. Но возможно ли, что США сами воспользуются этим как предлогом и передадут инициативу странам Персидского залива и Израилю? Режимы Персидского залива не в том положении, чтобы воевать с Ираном. И если они начнут, то, как я уже говорил, мы окажемся в зоне риска из-за жаркой погоды. Вы же были в Тегеране. У нас сейчас горы покрыты снегом. Если у нас не будет электричества, то, сами понимаете, летом будет очень жарко, и нам будет трудно спать по ночам из-за жары, если у нас не будет кондиционера. А в Эмиратах, если у них не будет электричества, если их критическая инфраструктура выйдет из строя, всем придется уехать. То же самое касается Кувейта и Катара. Все объекты этих режимов расположены прямо на побережье. Это пустыни. На самом деле в Йемене, Иране, Ираке и Ливане есть леса, там, знаете ли, 4 времени года, а в этих странах пустыни. У них есть только нефть и газ. А ведь их экономика полностью зависит от этого. И все их объекты находятся прямо на границе с Ираном. Они не в глубине территории. Эти страны маленькие, за исключением Саудовской Аравии. Так что если...
Let's say, it'll get very hot in the summer, and it'll be difficult for us to
Undeclared
sleep at night
wars
in the heat
are
if we don't
commonplace.
have our cooler.
Tragically, our government engages in
But in the
preemptive
Emirates,
war,
if they don't
otherwise
have
known as
electricity,
aggression, with no
if they don't
complaints
have,
from the American people.
their
Sadly, we have
critical
become accustomed to living with the
Everyone
illegitimate
has to
use of force by
Same
government.
is true
To
with,
develop a
Kuwait
truly free
and
society, the issue of initiating force must be
all the
understood
assets of these regimes are
and
right
rejected.
alongside the coast. They're desert.
What if sometimes, to love your country, you had to alter or
Yemen,
abolish the government? What
Iran,
if Jefferson was right?
Iraq and
What if
Lebanon
that government is
have
best which
forests,
governs
they have,
least?
Four seasons.
What if
But
it
these
is
countries are
dangerous
desert.
to be
All
right
they
when the
have is oil
government
and
is
gas.
wrong?
And they're
What if it
totally
is better to
dependent
perish
on
fighting for
this
freedom
for their economy.
than to live as a slave?
And all of their installations
What if
are right
freedom's
in front
greatest
of Iran.
hour of danger
They're not deep inside. These
is
countries
now?
are small, except for the Saudis. So if they want to get into conflict with Iran, I think that would be the end of these regimes. It would end very swiftly. So the Emirates should...
Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Wednesday, April 8th, 2026. Scott Ritter joins us now. Scott, I know you're busy, and thank you very much for coming on. Of course, we have much to discuss. I want to ask you a broad question before we get into what happened last night, what, if anything, was agreed to. Isn't it a basic principle of warfare not to start a war without clearly obtainable military objectives?
Because of the violations and the slaughter of women and children in Lebanon?
In short, the answer is yes. You don't start something that you don't know why you're starting.
Since the Israeli regime uses
because otherwise you end up lost, adrift, and oftentimes find yourself in places you hadn't anticipated to be in with no plan to get out. And just reading into your question, I think you find what happened to the United States in this particular instance.
Strike at each other before. That was the 12-day war.
Regime change?
Been seeing that,
no.
In the past 40 days.
Nuclear-enriched uranium surrendered? No.
Do this. To
Iranian ballistic missiles neutered? No.
They stop. But
Hormuz under Iran control? Yes. Was not under Iran control before. U.S. bases in the Middle East?
It is the Israeli regime that is taking
U.S. sanctions against Iran, probably neutered Iran their way out. What the hell did Trump accomplish?
Catastrophe. Netanyahu and the Zionists are pushing the world towards a global
Remember
depression.
that Donald Trump is a con man.
By violating the ceasefire,
his job isn't to accomplish things that are
the fight,
discernibly beneficial for the American people, but rather that which makes him look good. So he's going to spin this
pressure will build on
in a way
Trump
that's
and
as
regime.
positive as possible.
For example,
him.
India.
You will see. For instance, he's saying there will be no enrichment of uranium. Yes, there will be enrichment of uranium. Iran simply will not yield on this point. But what the United States will get
to show the sort of support they did after all the Israeli
Iran had agreed to prior to this war starting,
knows?
where the 60% enriched uranium will be diluted down, and that restrictions will be placed on Iran's enrichment program so that they can't enrich to that level, strict monitoring, etc. So Donald Trump can declare victory in that regard because he can honestly say that the deal he now has is better than any deal before, that he got the better deal. He got a better deal than the JCPOA, and it would be because there's no sunset clauses, there's no advanced, unrestricted enrichment taking place. So he can claim he got a better deal. But newsflash, he had a better deal before this war started. So going to war was ridiculous. Regime change, he's going to, and you're going to see this over and over again. There will be a chart put up with a number of faces on there. The first face will be Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader. Going down will be a bunch of Revolutionary Guard generals and senior politicians, etc. And they'll all have red X's through them. And And Trump will say, and he's already saying, that we have achieved regime change. We killed all the hardliners. Now we have a new set of more moderate people in Iran who are more compliant to the needs and wants of the United States and the region. And he'll spin it this way. But the reality is far different. They have,
I don't mean to demean his skill at the BS, but this goes far beyond that, I think.
Did you lose me for a minute?
The last we heard was the reality is far different.
BS when it comes
look, the president of Iran is the same president that existed before this conflict began. I think the foreign minister is the same foreign minister.
Right now
in the military, taking out the number one guy doesn't change the fact that the military is a system. And the system is composed of people of like mindsets, and so killing one Revolutionary Guard commander, you'll simply replace him with another. You don't change the outlook. The military and the Revolutionary Guard command remains the same entity it was when this conflict began. In many cases, even more hard line, because now they've actually fought the United States and won.
I think after 40 days, when the superpower,
the regime change argument is superficial, but it's one that Trump can make to an ignorant American public who likes to see charts with faces that have X's on them, and they suddenly feel empowered.
Along with all the proxies,
the Strait of Hormuz, we saw this today, where Donald Trump answering a question said,
Azerbaijan, who helped Israel.
We're going to come up with a joint tolling mechanism where Iran and the United States are going to make money off this. This is going to be a great deal. And we don't know how this is going to play out, but what this is a concession on the part of the United States that Iran will have physical control of the Strait of Hormuz and be able to exact tolls and raise income going through. We didn't gain control of the Strait of Hormuz, but Donald Trump will find a face-saving mechanism to say that because we're somehow involved in the tolling, that we are in control, and he'll spin that.
Again,
look, every one of these points will be spun by Donald Trump.
Iran is now hitting
it's not about convincing the Iranians. It's about convincing the American public. This war has been a political disaster for this president, and so he's going to have to work overtime to spin it, and which makes him,
And if we do get to
he
the
needs this peace deal. He needs this ceasefire to work, and so
it's not clear how much forward we
his
can
team
go,
will be
because
bending
if the
over
United States
backwards
is
to
not
work
willing
with the Iranians,
or capable
work with the Chinese, who are sort of the
reining
major
in
player
their
behind the scenes
mad
here,
dog in,
to come up with a deal that's
in Tel Aviv,
that's to the benefit of all. But the biggest winner here is Iran.
Before we get to how the deal came about, who sought, who begged
there will be
for
no
a ceasefire? Israel, Iran, or the United States?
Yeah, how do you unpack
it's the United States that put the feelers out the entire time.
For the ceasefire?
As soon as Donald Trump, the New York Times had an interesting story that sort of solidified what myself and others had long thought. That Donald Trump had been snookered by Benjamin Netanyahu in a series of meetings on February 11th. Benjamin Netanyahu, together with the head of the Mossad, don't give Donald Trump one-on-one access to the Israelis, because they do it all the time. They own him. They get in his head and they convince him of magic that will happen. And they believe that Israel and the United States would be able to achieve regime change. They would be able to topple the regime. They could get an uprising. The Kurds would come in. That they could stop the ballistic missiles. That they could get control of the nuclear program. All they had to do is have the Kurds
this time around. This
and the decisiveness to engage, and Trump went with it. I mean, almost everybody. And it's interesting because the New York Times provides some details. General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, said the Israelis often oversell their capabilities and results, and we need to be careful about that. The Marco Rubio and Waltz, the CIA director, said this regime change is a fantasy. It's not going to happen. And J.D. Vance said, I'm just dead set against this the whole way. I mean, I'll support you in the end, but I'm against this. There was nobody. Tulsi Gabbard wasn't even invited to the meeting. Neither was Secretary of Treasury Bessent, who might have been able to come in and weigh in on, what this is going to do to the oil market and the energy markets. The concept of the Strait of Hormuz being secured also was deemed to be fantasy. But Donald Trump believed everything the Israelis told him. And so, we ended up, going to war based upon Israeli lies.
Wow. So Trump desperately needed the
this time around.
the break, if you will, an opportunity to brag, an opportunity to exaggerate and claim victory. Do we know how this came about? Who was communicating to whom and through whom? We've all been told the Pakistanis were involved. You very intriguingly a few minutes ago, my dear friend, mentioned the Chinese. Were the Chinese involved? Was the Kremlin involved?
Which is more or less clear.
Was the Pope involved? I mean, the last few days, everybody's been shaking like a leaf, thinking that Trump was going to drop atomic bombs on Tehran. This must have aroused people to do something.
Pakistani prime minister, which,
well, first of all, let's put the atomic bomb thing
argues
in perspective.
Lebanon is part of the deal.
The 10-point plan that Iran put on the table, which Trump said we will look at during these negotiations, Islamabad, was put on the table before Trump made his threats. So the notion that Iran folded, and said, "Oh my God, we're afraid."
Quite extraordinary. I mean,
here's our 10-point peace plan. That's absurd. The Iranians already had that plan on the table. The Iranians already rejected Trump's 15-point plan. What the difference is this time is that instead of rejecting the 15-point plan again, what Iran said is, if the United States acknowledges our 10-point plan, then we will agree to sit down with them in Islamabad. And they came to that conclusion because of the Chinese. The Chinese intervened through Pakistan and said, you have no choice here because we're taking the hit. And we need to tell you at the end of the day, we care about China more than we care about you. We care about you. We want good things to happen to you, and we'll be here for you, and we'll back you up, and we'll do all this good stuff. But if you walk away from this deal, we're going to start taking a major hit in our economy. We need the flow of oil open now. Right now, no hesitation. And Pakistan said the same thing. We need oil right now too. And so Iran, understood that they had reached the limit of their, escalatory path. That they had been capped. They were going to start to lose allies. But it was the United States that went to Pakistan. The United States went to Egypt. The United States went to Turkey, and was reaching out to Iran through these intermediaries. The Iranians responded to the Pakistanis, and it was a complicated, but it was the United States that initiated this. Iran responded, as I've said all along. I mean, I'm going to have an interesting conversation with my good friend Nima over at Dialogue Works in a minute or so. And I told him exactly this. He insisted Iran would never compromise. I said, you have no choice. You have a good hand, but you're not holding a straight flush. Okay? And you don't have enough chips.
I don't want to be insulting or anything.
You can't keep this going on forever because you will destroy your country. Iran is going to emerge from this with sanctions lifted.
And then
the IAEA
as its own, and then
board of governors is going to terminate all complaints. Iran is emerging with a clean slate from the international law perspective. For the first time in the history of the Islamic Republic, and let me say that again, for the first time in the history of the Islamic Republic, Iran will be in complete control of its economy and its economic future. The Iranian people are going to reap the benefit of getting oil on the market at fair market value.
Into the actual
this is
deal
never
that's being
happened.
made
No
because,
sanctions, nothing. Just
what
free flow of
shocked,
energy.
I guess,
Already,
much of the
China
American
and
media was
Pakistan
that,
have put in major
Trump
purchasing
accepted
orders of
that the
Iranian
Strait of
oil
Hormuz
as we
would
speak.
be,
So
controlled
the
by
Iranians,
Iran.
this is a
Or
huge
more
victory for
specifically,
Iran.
it's
This is
supposed
what
to
the
be
Iranian government
both
has
the
been
Iranians
promising the
and
Iranian
Oman
people
is supposed
for
to be able to co-manage
several
it, or
decades
both
now,
at
and they're
least
now they're going to be able to deliver on this promise. This is a big deal. This is a huge victory for Iran, a huge victory for them. This is the most important aspect of this ceasefire agreement because
economic arrangement
it takes Iran out of the economic mediocrity that it had inhabited for 47 years, and now puts in a position where it will be a modern nation state.
But Oman, is
with
it more
a
just
lot
about
of
the geography,
income coming
or,
in, you're going to
or
see
is it about the collective
reconstruction.
security, or
You're going to
how do
see
we,
modern
sense of this?
facilities. Already, when I was in Iran in 2005,
first of all,
they had
a much more
a highway system that beats the New York State interstate hands down. I mean, the quality of the road, the quality of the rest stops, the whole thing. They already had good infrastructure. You're going to see high-speed rail. You're going to see
even though
a whole bunch of good stuff. This is happening because Iran won this war. Iran now is dictating terms. There will be compromises made. There have to be. But at the end of the day, Iran will benefit from this war. But this was not a war that ended on American terms being dictated to Iran. Iran did not fold. It was the United States that was seeking an off-ramp because we were in a world of hurt. We had run out of options. The only thing we had left was massive escalation that would have triggered
that I think
major unrest here. There were people in the Pentagon and in the Trump administration that said, you can't do this. And I'm not talking about nuclear weapons. I'm saying you can't bomb these things. That makes us literally a war crime state. People need to understand. I hear a lot of people saying it's dual purpose equipment. Come on, Scott, you're smarter than that. Yeah, I'm smarter than you because I know that if it's dual purpose, we hit it up front. If there was an energy production facility supporting the Parchan missile production facility, that was taken off the grid. We already hit that. Everything that's up now is singularly civilian use.
Iran becomes
and the fact that we now say if Iran doesn't give us the Strait of Hormuz, we will punish the entire country. Ladies and gentlemen, that is collective punishment. That is a violation of international law. Straight up violation. So much so that every general who would receive that order would have to say, ain't going to happen. Can't do it, boss. That's a war crime. And he was getting pushback from the Pentagon saying this escalation you're talking about is problematic for us from a legal constitutional standpoint. The other thing is it's cultural genocide. When the terminology he used to erase a civilization is terminology that, Judge, you know this, in the court of law, it's called intent. It's called intent. The intent is to erase a civilization. That is literally the definition of cultural genocide. And because you attach to it bombs dropping on people, it becomes genocide of a nation, of a race, a war crime. The president had reached the end of America's ability to escalate without transitioning fully into war criminal status. So the United States needed an off-ramp. We tried to snatch the nuclear material, didn't happen. We can't seize the Strait of Hormuz. The military came back and said, we can't do this. Literally, they told him, we can't do this. He had no more options except creating war crimes. He had to take the off-ramp. The Chinese knew this. And that's why the Chinese, because the Iranians were going to walk away. They're going to say, no, we're going to keep going. And the Chinese went, that ain't going to happen either because we need your oil.
Correct.
And if we don't get your oil, we can't be your friends anymore.
What?
And all right, I guess we got to do this.
What did the verbiage of Trump's threat, destroying a civilization, tell you about him?
Quite transformative to the entire international system.
Well, first of all, here we got to be careful because there are people who always point to the books written about Donald Trump, the madman theory. Donald Trump and the madman theory. Be crazy, be insane, put it out there, and make them think you don't know what's going on until you come back and they come to the table and they have to accept the deal.
But anyways, it's quite a significant.
This may work in New York City real estate. I mean, if you want to play stupid games about a building, play stupid games about a building. But you're now the President of the United States. You represent the nation on the rule of law. We don't do the madman theory. Richard Nixon did it, and people called him out and said, "That's not how we operate." You remember he said, "We need to have the North Vietnamese convinced that we are willing to drop nuclear bombs to bring it into this war." And his Pentagon went, "Nope, we're not convinced." So he had to be careful on this one. So is Trump playing the madman theory? Maybe, but I also think it's reflective of the fact that Donald Trump was angry and frustrated. First of all, remember, he went to war based upon Israeli lies, which were now manifest.
When he saw all the former presidents who had a great
the idea that Benjamin Netanyahu can sidle up to him and go, "Hey, I got some information." Trump said, "Get the hell out of here. You're a liar. You got us involved in a war, that you said was going to end in this way, and it didn't end any way like that." So he's frustrated about that. He's also frustrated about impotence, American impotence. We weren't able to do what Pete Hegseth said we could do. We didn't bomb him into oblivion. I mean, we bombed the hell out of them, but the Iranians are still there. We were told we were going to get their missiles, suppress them. Didn't happen. They got stronger and stronger. We were told we have the best special operations people in the world. We can go in and get that nuclear stuff. Couldn't do that. We got the best Marine Corps in the world, best amphibious ops. Certainly we can take an island in the middle of the Persian Gulf. Can't do that either. Why? Because Iran has missiles. And this is why the Tripoli is moving in the wrong direction. They're not moving towards enemy contact. They're moving away because the missiles. This is something General Berger, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, cautioned against in 2019 in his Commandant's guidance. He said, we can't do this anymore because the closer we get to shore, the more certainty is we're going to get sunk. Donald Trump suddenly was confronted with the fact that our missiles don't work. They're too expensive. We don't have enough of them. And the Iranians were able to ride out the best we could put out there and still be dominant. The Iranians controlled the decision-making cycle throughout this. We were reacting to the Iranians the entire time. There was never hesitancy on the part of the Iranians. For us, every day was, well, we have to rechange our plan. We have to bring in new resources. We have to look at different things. We have to recalculate how we're going to define victory. We were constantly in a state of chaos. The Iranians were straight on, mission focused. Not only that, the Iranians controlled the escalation.
Now it briefly opened the
they
Strait of
were in
Hormuz
charge of the escalation, and at the end, it was the Iranians that had a death grip on the Strait of Hormuz that was choking the world, and Donald Trump couldn't ignore that, and he didn't have a solution to it. But the other problem is that the Iranians had reached the end of their escalation capabilities, because it's one thing to have your hand on the throat. It's another thing to squeeze it and choke the life out of everybody. And that was Iran's next option. It was the last option they had, to squeeze and choke. But the problem is, as they squeeze and choke, they're going to go down too. It's a mutual suicide pact. And, both sides realized we need to get off this ramp. They both escalated as far as they could go. And to go any further would be terminal for all parties. And the Chinese, because the Iranians are like, we're okay with that. We're ready. And the Chinese went in and said, you're not, and we're not. China deserves a great deal of credit here for it, and the Pakistanis too. The Pakistanis played a brilliant role as mediators, and China played a brilliant role at the end of being the adult, saying no more. The Russians played a role. We're not sure exactly what, but the Russians were backing the Chinese up. The Russians were helpful in the Security Council to prevent, a Chapter 7 resolution being passed that would authorize military force that would prolong this conflict. We still have outliers. Israel doesn't want to play ball regarding Lebanon. The Pakistani president just came out and said, no, Lebanon's part of the ceasefire too. The United Arab Emirates woke up this morning and decided they wanted to go to war against Iran. I think Iran is going to is going to remind them that they don't want to go to war against Iran. There's missiles flying already. The United States will also make a phone call and tell the UAE to sit down and shut up. There's also the issue of 31 autonomous military districts. There's a problem when you blow up communications, command and control, and seek to take out leadership. The Iranians had a plan, which is they have 31 autonomous military districts that operate independent of the other. And even when they're not in communication, they have a war plan that they're executing. Well, some of these autonomous districts aren't in communication with Tehran, and they don't know there's a ceasefire yet. And so they're still fighting this war. And so there's some cleanup that has to happen. There's a lot of loose ends out there. But the point is, both the United States and Iran are committed to a path of peace. And they both need this peace. Iran to thrive, to deliver on the promise to its people. And the United States to get out of it, to free itself from this tar baby that we've embraced, and we can't get loose from.
Has been killing
how
Lebanese
miserable
every day since
was Benjamin Netanyahu when he woke up this morning?
So
look, Netanyahu was aware that this was happening. I don't know if his cabinet was aware. So the real question is how miserable has Ben Gvir.
If these regimes did not allow
the
the United States
extremely
to use
miserable
their airspace and their territory,
but Netanyahu
and their sea, and their
remember,
shoreline,
he doesn't hold any cards.
we would not have had this.
He sold this war to Trump.
Americans could not.
He said things are going to happen, and they didn't happen. So imagine being the used car salesman who sold somebody, a 68 Camaro and said, this thing works perfectly. We've rehabbed it. It's worked. And now you're getting a phone call from a guy who's stuck out on the freeway with an engine that's fallen apart. The axles have rusted through. Calling up saying, hey, you sold me a lemon. That dealer doesn't have too much leverage now, does he? And that's Benjamin Netanyahu. He sold Trump a lemon. a huge limit. And Trump, this is, we're talking about Trump's political legacy. We're not just talking about failure of the military and all this kind of stuff. We're talking, the thing that's most important to Donald Trump is Donald Trump. And we're talking about a political legacy that is at risk here.
Somebody else who sold him a lemon is his Secretary of Defense, who calls himself the Secretary of War.
For their own people.
Yeah, he's in trouble.
But they can live
look,
normally. But if they choose a different
when this
path,
thing settles down,
I don't
heads
think
will
their
roll.
countries will exist.
And I think Pete Hegseth's head will be one of those that is going to roll. His incompetence is manifest.
Great point.
Even the generals advised against this, and Hegseth said, "Let's do it. I can do this. Don't worry, boss. I got this. We got this." And he might have prayed, and he might have said things that had a lot of lethality and other terminology in there. But the reality is, Pete Hegseth is incompetent, and his incompetence was shown to be manifest in our failure to accomplish any of our military. We accomplished zero military objectives in this campaign. People need to reflect on that. We accomplished zero military objectives.
What happens with Israel, though, if it continues to slaughter Palestinians, if it continues to try and annex southern Lebanon, if it continues to attack Hezbollah, whether it's with pagers or with missiles?
Well, remember, the United States gave Israel sort of the green light here. We were sitting there working with the Lebanese government under the assumption that Hezbollah was defeated. Hezbollah was a paper tiger. Hezbollah woke up, and suddenly people are going, wait a minute, these guys are not just firing missiles deep into Israel on a sustained basis, but they're beating the Israelis hands down. And in fact, the Israelis just suffered a major defeat. They tried a river crossing, and Hezbollah, beat this unit, forced them to retreat, abandoned equipment on the field. Hezbollah is picking off the Israelis. They're not being defeated.
I don't know.
Israel right now is trying to make the claim that it's not part of the ceasefire deal. Well, Iran's going to send a message, I think, today that says you are part of it. And if you don't want to play, we're going to hit you. And the United States isn't going to let Israel. Remember, Donald Trump doesn't care about Israel more than Donald Trump cares about Donald Trump. And Donald Trump right now understands that he is on the verge of getting wiped out politically in the midterm elections if he doesn't reverse this right now. He has to get out of this war, reverse it, and by the summer of this year, 2026, he has to show that he's the greatest peacekeeper ever, that there are benefits to the American people. He has to show money rolling in from the tariffs that are collected in the Persian Gulf, all this stuff. But there needs to be peace. And he's not going to let Israel get in the way. So Israel is going to play a game, and then the United States is going to set them straight. Israel's lost this war. It's an embarrassment for the Israelis. But one of the things that'll be made clear is that, first of all, how does Israel reconstruct? Who's going to pay for that? Where's that money going to come from? The United States can play a role in helping facilitate reconstruction, but we're not going to let Israel get in the way of breaking this peace deal up. The same thing with Gaza. I think this actually, creates opportunities for a Palestinian state because Israel is weakened now. They oversold their capabilities, and Hezbollah is not defeated. And there's probably and the other nation that's going to have to get a wake-up call is the United Arab Emirates. The Sparta of the Middle East. I think this morning they decided they wanted to go to war against Iran, and they went out and launched an air raid against an island and some oil refineries. Iran is responding right now with heavy strikes against them, Kuwait, and Bahrain. Again, not against the United States, but against Gulf Arab nations who are uneasy about what Donald Trump is doing, and Donald Trump will have to put them on notice too. The United States has a lot of babysitting that needs to be done with Israel and the Gulf Arab states to bring this to an end, but at the end, it has to be a comprehensive piece. There can't be any outliers.
Sometimes
they don't take one clip for you.
Yeah, and also
a senator with whom I rarely agree on anything. Almost sounds like Scott Ritter. Senator Edward Markey of Massachusetts last night. Chris, number 14.
Donald Trump has surrendered,
a lot of people,
not the Iranians.
Injustice
and what he has been doing over the last several days is an impeachable offense. He has threatened a genocide against a nation. He has threatened to end a civilization. He has threatened to use nuclear weapons against a country that does not have nuclear weapons. All of these are impeachable offenses, and he must be brought to justice. The House and Senate should be brought back into session. There should be articles of impeachment brought against him by the Democrats in the House of Representatives. We need to make Donald Trump accountable for what he has just done in the name of the American people. And I think this is going to be a defining moment for the Congress, for the American people. We cannot allow Donald Trump in control of nuclear weapons to be invoking this madman theory of the destruction of a civilization in the name of the American people without him being brought to accountability. The impeachment process must begin.
Thank you, Glenn.
I know that Trump's going to be able to sell this as a victory, Scotty.